I've gotten several comments recently from people asking me why I use VirtualBox instead of Virt-Manager with QEMU. And the real reason is because I've tried Virt-Manager with QEMU several years ago when I was really into distro hopping and also just less knowledgeable about technology in general. And I couldn't get it to work. I couldn't figure out how to get the virtual machines to behave correctly, and there wasn't really a lot of good resources out there for me to look at to figure it out at that time. So I just used VirtualBox because it just works, and there's a lot more effort that's put into making things work with VirtualBox than there is with Virt-Manager. If you distro hop, then you're probably going to have a lot more luck with VirtualBox, since the developers of all these different Linux distros know that the majority of people who are going to be trying out their operating system in a virtual machine are going to be doing that virtualization in VirtualBox. And distro hopping is also something that people who are new or just have a mid-range experience with Linux tend to do a lot of. So obviously, if you're new to Linux and not really much of a tech wizard already, the simplest option is likely going to be the better one for you. So it's pretty much the same kind of issue that we have with gaming on Windows versus gaming on Linux. The devs oftentimes don't think it's really worth the time and the effort to confirm that their desktop distro is working correctly with Virt-Manager and QEMU. Just like how game devs, they're not always going to take the time to fix bugs for their game on Linux because the majority of people who are playing games are doing it on Windows. Now, with all of this in mind, it's still worth looking into and promoting this type of virtualization, because at the very least, it produces competition. If there are a variety of virtualization softwares on Linux that are competing with one another, then all of these different softwares have to constantly improve and one-up each other in order to survive as programs, in order to have that user base and try to grow that user base to become the dominant virtualization software. And also, these two methods of virtualization, they're really not the same. They achieve the virtualization in different ways. So first off, with VirtualBox, that is our just works method of virtualization. It's a single program that you install, which includes everything you need for virtualization. Typically, you would also add an extension pack to it as well, so that you can have shared folders and shared clipboards and be able to drag and drop files between the host and the guest VMs. So maybe it's technically two programs, but VirtualBox is easy to install and get it running. Even a tech noob could figure it out. But as is often the case with this just works solutions, these really simple, user-friendly pieces of software, there is a sacrifice that's made, and that sacrifice is performance and extensibility, and we sacrifice that in order to have it be a little bit easier to use. Or at least in theory. Maybe it is possible to have something as easy to use as VirtualBox and as good performance as QEMU with Virt-Manager. Now, QEMU, on the other hand, it supports a wider range of hardware and CPU instructions for that hardware. So right out of the gate, QEMU and Virt-Manager, even though it's harder to set up, actually is going to work on more platforms, especially professional-grade hardware. And QEMU, it's also really a command line interface for managing VMs. There are GUIs that you could install on top of QEM, but again, it's really targeted more at professional use, enterprise use. You know, people, when they're managing hundreds of VMs, they typically don't interface with them graphically. They just interface with them at the command line, because more than likely, these VMs are going to be multiple instances of the same thing, so you don't actually have to see what's going on with a desktop. In fact, you probably don't even have a desktop loaded on these VMs. You're probably running some sort of web framework on them or something like that. But anyway, You can install those GUIs on top of it, Virt-Manager, like I have here, if you would prefer to use it more as like a virtualization for testing Linux VMs, which we're going to do in a moment. So QEMU is focused more towards the professional use, but ultimately you can squeeze more performance out of it. Sort of like with Gentoo. It takes longer to configure and set up, but ultimately it's going to yield better performance. And also, QEMU is able to achieve better performance because it actually executes guest VM code directly on the host CPU. Now, I would have expected something like this to put you at a greater security risk, but I couldn't actually find any evidence to substantiate that hypothesis. And both of these programs have had bugs in the past where code could escape the VMs, but it's not like QEMU has had a significant increase of these bugs over VirtualBox. So in my non-expert opinion, both of these are just as secure as one another. But anyway, enough theory about the virtualization. Let's get to the brass tacks tutorial. Now, as I mentioned, you'll need a few different programs for this type of virtualization, and you'll also have to make sure that you have KVM enabled in your kernel. So first of all, we're going to do lc_all equals lowercase c lscpu, and then pipe that into grep, and we're grepping for virtual. Let me make sure I spelled this right. IZATION, virtualization with a capital V. And so I have it enabled. Most distros will have this enabled by default, and also if you're using a AMD CPU, it's going to say AMD over here. Mine says VTX because I'm using an Intel CPU. So yeah, as long as you're not using a custom kernel or you didn't customize your kernel yourself, most likely you're going to have this enabled. And then we're going to go ahead and install all the software that we need. So sudo apt install QEMU Virt-Manager lib virt bin. And again, this is on Linux Mint or any other Debian-based system. You can do Pacman or Emerge if you're on Gentoo. And also on Mint, I needed this particular package dependency as well. You might not need this, but GIR 1.2 hyphen spice CLIENT 3.0. And I'll be sure to include this in the description as well, as I always try to do. Then, once that's installed, we want to enable the libvirt daemon on our system. So if you're using systemd as your init system, the command is going to be sudo systemctl enable libvirt. So now that's going to enable libvirt whenever we restart our system, but we also want to enable it right now. So sudo systemctl start libvirt. And finally, you want to add your current user to the libvirt group, and you can do that with sudo usermod g libvirt a Kenny, or whatever your username is. Now, if you get an error that the libvirt group doesn't exist, then you could just go ahead and create this group. The group doesn't always get created during installation for everyone. Didn't get created for me. So you can do that with sudo add group libvirt, and then just rerun the previous command, the user mod, to add yourself to the group now that that group actually exists. It's also possible that you could get an error when starting Virt-Manager for the first time, that the daemon is not running, the daemon for libvirt. And to fix that, sometimes you just have to relog your system in order for Virt-Manager to detect the daemon right after you install it. So relog, then start Virt-Manager, and then it should look something like this without any type of errors or anything like that. So you can see that I'm using QEMU/KVM, and I've already got one virtual machine created in here. So why don't we go ahead and open it up. Let's see, can I show you guys the, if I can show you guys the stats of it. I just started using this again for the first time in a year. You know what? Why don't we just go ahead and create a new one together? So let's go up here to File, New Virtual Machine. And as you can see, there's a few different ways that you can install VMs. We're just going to do the local install media. So this is the same way that you would have done it in VirtualBox, essentially. You download your ISO and then you boot from it in a virtual hard disk and install it. So we'll do that. And then for architecture options, so this is what I was talking about when I said that it works on many, many more architectures than VirtualBox does. So if you have any of these down here, then you can now do virtualization. I'm just an x86 64, like most of you all will be as well. So then we'll go forward, and then we'll select that virtual machine. Let's see, browse local. Let's see, we'll just do this Ubuntu one. Do another one. Forward. So then for RAM, we'll do, let's see, I'll do 40, 96. We'll do 2 CPUs. And sure, 20 gigs should be enough. And we'll just call this Ubuntu temp, because I'm probably going to delete it right after. And let's see, we'll just do a host bridge. All right, finish. Then it pops up here. One thing about it that's a little annoying is it always loads with, I'm guessing this is a 4:3 ratio. There's probably a setting that I could change to actually get it to load with 1920 by 1080, so that's actually full resolution on my screen. But this is, you know, new to Virt-Manager after several years of not using it. Another thing too is it seems like it's a little bit lighter on system resources than VirtualBox. I'll actually compare that into a fully set up VM. So yeah, you can see here that this is basically how you go about setting it up. So same way that you would do it on any other virtualization software. And then to change your mouse pointer back to your host, because like as you can see right now, I can't actually scroll outside to my actual host machine or to any of my other screens. You just want to do left control and alt at the same time, and then it'll free that mouse pointer up. So let's take a look now at the Ubuntu VM that I created before. So if we go into the details, you can see it's configured the same way. 2 CPUs, 4096 megs of RAM. So let's start that up. Oh, let me shut this one down properly too. That's another thing that I've noticed. I mean, it's probably just that I'm doing it wrong, but seems like it's a little bit trickier to get these other ones to behave. All right, and let me see, where is my Ubuntu? Here it is. All right, so we'll do full screen. And yeah, so it looks like I still have to change the resolution in it. A little bit annoying, but again, it's not that big of a deal. Okay, there we go. It went ahead and fixed itself. All right, so as you saw, we're using 4 gigs of memory on this VM. And it's like it's basically using 4 gigs of memory on the host. I mean, I frankly don't even know how it's able to achieve that. It's pretty awesome. So yeah, we do that. Obviously, if we open up VirtualBox, it's going to be a bit more than this. Let me actually go ahead and do that. Let me actually first do a side-by-side htop. So I went and installed htop inside of this VM. So yeah, you can see, I mean, obviously this in the VM is not using the full 4 gigs of RAM. The reason we're using the 4 gigs of RAM here is because we're basically dedicating that 4 gigs of RAM to the virtual machine so that that 4 gigs can't really be used by the host to run, you know, like Firefox or OBS or anything else that I might have open inside of my host VM. So yeah, we'll leave, put the htop back on the other screen. We'll close out of this and shut it down. Actually, let me do it this way, because this is the way that works, at least for me. The other ways don't always want to shut it down properly. Alright, so we'll go into this guy here, Ubuntu. This is actually a new Ubuntu that I just installed, so let's do 2 processors. I've already got 4 gigs of RAM there. Gotta make sure the hard disk is my first boot priority. Should I leave video? Okay, you know what? I'm gonna even leave the video memory at 16 megs. I don't think that I had to configure that. Let's see. Let's see if we can actually do a side-by-side comparison of the video memory. Let's see. Where would I see my video memory? Probably here, right? Okay, that doesn't say anything about video memory. Yeah, I'm not exactly sure how much video memory this is using, if that's even the case with this type of virtualization, but we'll just leave this at 16 megs, right? In theory, if it's 16 megs, it's going to use less. Alright, so we got Ubuntu loading up. One thing that I have noticed too, this probably won't really show up so much in the video, but there's less input lag between this Ubuntu VM and the other one. And let's see, is this going to use full screen when it logs me in? No. So let's fix that. Let's see, display. Oh, I wonder if I'm using the wrong type of, I think I am. Yeah, because I don't have a 1920 available. Alright, let me fix that real quick. Or maybe I need to crank this up. That might be the case. I might actually need to just have higher video memory in order for 1920 by 1080 to work. Okay, this is not giving me high hopes since it didn't autocorrect. And I still don't have 16.9s available. Okay, let me see if I can figure out why all of a sudden Full HD is not working in VirtualBox. It's as if it knows that Virt-Manager has been installed and it's going to be replaced soon. Alright, got it working now. For some reason, it wasn't defaulting to VBox VGA. That's the correct graphics controller for me to use inside of it. Alright, so let's do our comparison. See which one is the least bloated. It's still the IO, like the actual input for me typing to the commands showing up, still feels like it is faster in Virt-Manager. Let's see, sudo apt install htop, because It's not included in Ubuntu by default. All right, let's do a comparison. You know, it looks like it's about the same. I would have thought that Virt-Manager would have used fewer system resources all around, but it looks like it's about the same. I don't know. I don't remember what the configurations were for Virt-Manager originally. I think it was around 3 gigs or so. So, in terms of performance, you get faster performance with input, obviously, but I don't know in terms of your RAM and CPU usage if QEMU and Virt-Manager is a whole lot more minimal, at least with running Linux guest. Maybe it's different if you're doing Windows guest. So let's quit out of here. Now, if you've already been using VirtualBox for a while like me, then you might be thinking, well, I already have all of these VDI style VMs, and VDI is not compatible with Virt-Manager. So why would I want to recreate these in QEMU, especially if you have virtual machines that take several hours to create, like my Gen 2 VMs? They take a while to deploy since we're compiling everything on them. The good news is that with QEMU, you get this CLI tool called QEMU IMG convert, which allows us to convert any VDI style virtual machines into a what is the type? QCOW2. That's the kind that QEMU uses. So I'm here inside of my Gen 2 virtual machine folder. So here is the command that you would want to use. I'm just gonna copy and paste this because it's a little bit convoluted, but I'll still walk you guys through it. So you've got your sudo QEMU image convert f VDI O QCOW2, so that's the output type, and then you identify the VDI that you want to convert, in my case gen210.vdi, and then this is actually going to output that converted Gen2, the gen210.qcow, into the directory that Virt-Manager actually keeps its virtual machines in. So let me go ahead and run this. I've got no idea how long this command actually takes to run. Hopefully it's not too long. Alright, so that command did take about 5 or 6 minutes to finish running, but it's done now, so let's go ahead and... I thought that Gen 2 would pop up in here automatically, but it didn't. Let's do a new virtual machine, import existing disk image, browse. Okay, so we have the Gen 2 10 here, and you see it's the same format as all these other ones, so let's choose that volume. Sure, yeah, always type generic. Memory, let's do also 4096 and 2 CPUs. And we'll call this Gen 2. Finish. Oh, yeah, let's go ahead and do host device, bridge. All right, let's see if this works. I'm probably gonna have to do, let's full screen it first. Oh, okay. This looks insane. Okay. Let's see, is it going to fix itself once I start X, or is it still gonna look crazy? Okay, looks like start X didn't actually work. Let's see. Yeah, I'm getting some errors here. So you can see that the VM does work, just doesn't work with this Gen 2 right now. Something in there that I'll probably have to fix, but then again, that's Gen 2 for you. But anyway, this is how you set up QEMU, KVM, Virt-Manager, that whole virtualization stack. Go ahead and try it out on your machines. See if you get better performance with it. I'm probably going to continue using it a bit because, like I said a couple times already, I do get better input-output from using this versus VirtualBox. Hope this was useful for you guys. If it was, be sure to leave a like, subscribe, and share it with somebody else who would find it useful as well.